Good morning, everybody. The time of the chime is 10 o'clock a.m. We are going to call our House Special Session 2 or Extraordinary Session 2 Commerce Committee to order. Please take the roll.
Representatives Bricken, Chisholm, Freeman, Gillespie, Griffey, Halford, Harris, Hurt, Leatherwood, Miller, Moody, Parkinson, Powers, Ramsey, Travis, Vital, White, Vice Chairman Todd, Chairman Vaughn.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Before we get started today, anybody have any really pressing personal orders? And I mean, they must be about to make you pop to hear one. Glad there are none. We know that this is going to be a great deal of information for us to assume and for us to actually take our duties in the manner in which they have been given to us. This is a great deal of information. It's very important to many segments of our state that we give this the proper consideration, proper time. It's a complicated process. I've read through this. I'm in real estate development. I have a ton of questions myself about how we got to where we are. But I understand too that I was not in the room during negotiations, and the ability for us to relive those moments may or may not be prudent. So what I'm going to do, though, as far as a little bit of a housekeeping rule, we're going to set a rule today for how we're going to conduct this hearing. We're going to hear presentations from the bill sponsors. Then we will have let Ben, my capable analyst here, know if you have questions. We're going to do this on a manner to where everybody gets a fair shot. We're not going to have anybody hogging all the questions. You may have the ability to ask 20 questions, but you're not going to ask them all at the same time, because somebody else may have the same exact question as you, and you may get your questions answered later. So what we're going to do is we're going to call on folks to ask a question, and you'll get one follow-up to that question, and then we'll move on to another member. And so that's the way we'll conduct this hearing today. Understood. It's exciting times. By the way, that doesn't apply to me. I can pontificate and follow up with questions all I want, but I am a benevolent dictator. So this is a great opportunity we have set in front of us. Again, it's our duty to provide the due diligence for the people who sent us here to make sure that the structure of this board and authority and the creation of it and the reasons behind it are easily understandable, because we're making a great investment. We think we're in the middle of a transformational opportunity for my end of the state, but at the same time, we want to be prudent in our actions. So our first item of business is House Bill 8001 by Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll be stepping aside in a moment for both Leader Gant and Representative Hurd, who will be the presenting sponsors today. But I just want to kind of set the stage. We have a technical correction amendment. If we could get that on the bill before I step aside, it is literally just from our legal department. We're talking commas and periods and grammatical issues that should have been filed properly and on time with the committee.
Let me follow up and make sure that that's 009662. No, excuse me, 9962.
I believe that is correct, Mr. Chairman.
All righty. We've got a motion and a second on that. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. The ayes have it. We're discussing the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, this is for specifically the Mega Site Authority of West Tennessee. That's what this is labeled. It's the Mega Site Authority of West Tennessee Act of 2021, and that's the bill that is before you today. So again, Representative Hurt will be stepping in a moment just to kind of talk about some of the reasoning behind this, and then Leader Gant will be talking about some of the nuts and the bolts of the structure of this. I will tell you that I appreciate the duties of this committee. And Mr. Chairman, you have run an extraordinarily good committee over the last year, and I appreciate your service and leadership today to guide us through this. This is a lot. to wade through. And I joined the chairman in encouraging us all to ask questions and make sure that we all understand exactly what this is. The concept is extraordinarily exciting and is for an area in the state that as a state, we have not invested in, quite frankly, anywhere near as heavily as we should have. And this is that opportunity. But with that in mind, Mr. Chairman, if I can yield to Representative Hurt.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Leader. I'm just going to take just a second to express the impact this has, the opportunity and the potential impact this has on our area of the state. Representing the district there of the 82nd district, which is where the majority of the acreage lies. And growing up there and living there my whole life and seeing the state develop around us and losing population like we are as a school teacher for 14 years and watching students come through and talk to them about jobs and potential and the fact that they wanted to live in that area, but they had to move to pursue their dreams and the things they wanted to do. This will change lives. This has the potential to change lives and transform the area of our state. With that being said, I do understand and respect the fact that we owe it to the taxpayers of Tennessee to ask the questions and to get this right and to make sure it's done right. And that's why we're here today, to do our due diligence. And I respect that. I look forward to working with each of you. I look forward to having your questions answered and getting everybody comfortable with where we are with moving forward with this legislation. So thank you, and I'll yield to Leader Gant.
Thank you, Representative Hurt. Thank you, Chairman and committee. This is obviously a historic time for Tennessee, and especially West Tennessee. And I want to first start out by thanking the many people that played a part to get us to this point. And I think this is goes back to a 20-year project going back to I think the mid-90s, if I'm not mistaken. But I want to thank the local people there for continuing to have the faith in this project, our local mayors, county commissioners, obviously our different ECD partners that we've had over the years in Commissioner Randy Boyd and Haggerty and Commissioner Rolfe and the team that they have assembled to get us to this point. And obviously Governor Haslam is to be thanked, and also Governor Bill Lee, obviously, for taking us across the finish line with his strong approach to funding this site. And I'm very thankful for his steadfast approach to this and not letting any of us lose sight of how important this project is. So what I'm going to do at this point, I mean, this is going to be quite lengthy, but I think it's important for all of us to know the actual facts of this project. So if you'll bear with me as I go through these impact projections and a summary of what this legislation does, and then we'll kind of go into a question and answer period of time. We've got the administration here, ECD is here as well. So the project is projected to generate temporary construction benefits, including $5.6 billion in capital investments and the equivalent of approximately 33,000 temporary, direct, indirect, and induced jobs supporting the construction period. Approximately $1.87 billion in total earnings are related to this multi-year construction activity. The project will have a substantial long-term economic impact on the region. After the construction period, the project is anticipated to generate more than 27,000 new jobs through direct project activity as well as indirect and induced economic activity supporting the project's operations and its workforce. This will result in more than $1.2 billion in earnings for workers in the region on an annual basis. Additionally, the project is projected to contribute $3.5 billion each year to Tennessee's gross state product. And the total project size is $5.6 billion investment and 5,760 projected jobs. Jobs and investment in property split between Ford and the joint venture JV partner battery plant. SK Innovation is assumed to be the JV partner battery plant. It is important to note that that joint venture has not been officially formed yet, but is in the works. Ford, the JV partner, and the other suppliers will occupy 3,600 acres of the total 41 acres of the mega site. to make up what we call the Blue Oval City. 500 acres separate from Blue Oval City's 3,600 acres are still available at the Memphis Regional Mega Site. And I will just make a side note that there's no specifics, but I know there's other projected tenants for that, hopefully for those remaining acres there in Fayette County, I think is the remaining portion of that. Is that right? The incentives from the state, $500 million capital grant, which is ECD. For reference, Volkswagen, listen to this, for reference, Volkswagen was awarded about $488 million from the state of Tennessee for their plant in Chattanooga over three grants between 2008 and 2019. Volkswagen committed to create 5,000 jobs with a $2.4 billion capital investment. State to build, own, and operate a $40 million TCAT on the site. State to build and own, operate water and wastewater plants to serve mega site. State to build second interchange on I-40 TDOT. Long-term payment in lieu of taxes. The pilot leases with purchase option of 3,600 acres on the Memphis Regional Mega Site. Additional resources included in the memorandum of understanding from existing funding, not in the new appropriations bill, and they are as follows. $2 million grant for electric vehicle related workforce development, TDEC, $21 million in kind, not a grant, workforce support such as job fairs and screening. Federal funding that will pass through as well, $400,000 for REV grant to from the ORNL. The REV grant program at ORNL was supported by state funding to help communities with high-tech business innovation. State to act as the Industrial Development Board, which we call the Mega Site Authority, to collect pilot payments. Pilot payments are locked in for 30 years for Ford and JV partner battery plant. All pilot payments delivered to local governments for infrastructure, schools, safety, and healthcare, etc. The pilot payments represent a property tax abatement of approximately 75%, meaning that Ford and JV partner will be responsible for 25% of the actual annual property tax bill that would ordinarily be. And there's a scale from 1 to 30 years of how much the payout is. The second year starts at 1 million and through a sliding scale up to 30 years goes to 11,500,000 payout per year. The first payment is due 10/1 of 23, and the total payments are 269 million in total pilot payments to local governments. TVA to provide power and substations, etc. A&R Pipeline, TC Energy to provide natural gas. The accountability of this project based on 500 million capital grant and 175 million agreed upon value of Memphis Regional Megasite land improvements. Ford and JV partner must hire and maintain at least 90% of 5,760 jobs on the 10th anniversary date of the accountability agreement to avoid what we call clawbacks. Grant jobs accountability will be split between Ford and JV partner with details of the split to be determined in the near future. The pilot has separate accountability. After 10 years, pilot payments will increase if the number of jobs decrease. State is protected against bankruptcy for 10 years. State retains ownership of the land and buildings if Ford and JV partner fails to perform under the accountability agreement and or declares bankruptcy. And at this point, I'll open it up to some questions, and we'll try to, field. And if you want to call up, Mr. Chairman, call up the administration, we can go from there.
All righty, everyone. I have a basic question, and if the members of the administration like to join us at the tables, I'm sure we have some very specific questions to ask y'all. I have one to begin with, and that is, and for our fellow members, whenever you're about to purchase real estate or you're about to sell real estate, typically the number is one of the easiest things to get to. It's the terms and conditions that create issues for the transaction. And what we're here to do today is to frankly discuss the terms and conditions of the transaction in front of us. And one of my basic questions, and this is for all these smart people at the table down there today, and which, by the way, thank you all for your work and thank you for getting us to this spot. But my question is, why are we here? Explain to us why we're here in a special session to discuss the formation of an authority board when the joint venture partnership has not yet made. We're here to grant extraordinary powers to an entity, but yet the joint venture partners on the manufacturing side, there's caveats that they haven't made yet. So I would ask, number one, the first question is, I understand the appropriation of the dollars, making sure that this legislature is comfortable investing this, because from everything we've seen, it's a transformational opportunity. But are we ready to get the cart in front of the horse? And I'm asking us the question, are we getting the cart in front of the horse? Why do we need to get this authority established during this special session? Again, I understand the appropriation of dollars, because right now, apparently, we're operating off a memorandum of understanding. There's no contracts out there. But that's one of my issues. That's my first question is, why the suddenness for this special session? Number two, what happens if SK and Ford don't reach agreement? Because, people get hit by trains, things happen along the way, and they don't always happen the way that we want them to. So what is our caveat, and what's our exposure in case that joint venture does not make? And Commissioner.
Yes, sir. So my
And
name is,
excuse me, whenever we're going to relax a little bit of the protocol, because frankly, I'm not real great at it anyway. So what I'd like to do is, whenever one of y'all figure out which one is the best person to answer a question, just tell everybody your name. We all know who you are, but for the record,
Okay.
just share your name. Thank you.
yes, sir. So, Mr. Chairman, my name is Bobby Roth. And just to begin the conversation, it was our team at ECD that negotiated this memorandum of understanding. And so please know that while it's not a perfect memorandum of understanding, this was a team of 12 people inside of ECD that worked around the clock for about 30 days to bring forward to the state, hopefully a framework to approve a significant transaction. So as with respect to any questions that you have about what is in the MOU and how it came together, we'll certainly be prepared to answer that. Having said all of that, I can promise you one thing. We hired the best counsel. We were so thoughtful. Every decision we negotiated, and this was a business negotiation, just like as you mentioned, a real estate transaction. We did everything we had to do in our power to make sure, first and foremost, that we had the state's best interest, and also that we made sure that the state's best interests were protected. And I say that to you because of the enormous capital outlay. So your question to us is, why the sudden hurry up for this approval when the joint venture has not been approved? And let me just say that this time frame is extraordinary. Unlike any project, this is going to be the largest project that we know of. And this project arrived at our desk in February. And by August 31st, Ford Motor Company made the decision to come to Tennessee. And then we spent 30 days working on this memorandum of understanding. And it took many hours to negotiate and talk through every eventual unknown, because we have here a joint venture that's been announced, but has not been negotiated between the two parties. So the short answer is, Ford Motor Company is in an enormous hurry, as is every other company, that's trying to build out either the electric vehicle and or the electric vehicle parts. And the greatest component, the most important significant component of an electric vehicle are the electric batteries. SK is a great Korean company. We have recruited, we've known them for years. We've been over there to South Korea to meet with them, so we know this group. Where SK plays such a significant part is they are the intellectual property, the R&D, the research behind this battery that's so critical to vehicle. For years, if a car was able to travel 100 miles and then it took 8 hours to recharge, that was really a non-starter for so many consumers. They have developed the technology that they own. It's their intellectual property that allows this vehicle to maybe deliver 300 or 400 miles under one charge and then have a supercharge within about 20 minutes to 80% capacity. Now, the short answer to this question is, I'm not sure what is going on behind the curtain, but nobody can come to draw down $1 before they've dotted all the T's, dotted all the I's and crossed the T's. And I say that to you. Ford Motor Company could show up and take down all $500 million and be responsible for 5,760 jobs. That's one potential. That's one extreme. And then the other extreme is that the joint venture should be negotiated in the first quarter of the coming year. And then once that's negotiated, then that joint venture would present their credentials and they would come forward and sign the same agreements that we've negotiated so that the state is protected. What we, again, I'm not sure this is how we would move forward with a transaction like this, but I can also point to our experience with General Motors. When they did their joint venture for their battery, these were the same optics. They had a great joint venture partner, LG Energy, and they did not negotiate their joint venture really until they made their announcement. So I don't have enough great reasons, but I can promise you not $1 will be spent or given or provided to that joint venture until such time as they have met all the same requirements, signed the same kinds of accountability agreements, signed the same lease agreements, entered into the same pilot agreements to make sure that the state is protected 100%.
Thank you, Commissioner Rolfe. And to demonstrate my sometimes lack of formality, we're out of session. Thank you, Chairman Parkinson. I understand that, and let me say, you guys are pros. We understand that. I'm trying to get to what's the rush for the formation of this entity, because even in the amendment itself, it somewhere back here, and excuse me for not having it underlined, it points out that in the absence of this Megasite Authority convening and passing its organizing resolution, then in the interim, the Department of General Services has these same authorities. So I'm just trying to figure out why we're in a rush to create a government, state government, quasi-governmental entity that we understand on the private business side, that we can say, hey, these folks, they're trying to get, they're still negotiating. We're kind of out of the negotiating realm at this point, it seems to me. And I don't want you to think that we're sitting here being critical of y'all's negotiations, because I hate having somebody looking over my back. I'm trying to get to this formation of this authority, how it evolved into what it is, and the thought process behind that. That's to me, out of all of that, that's one of my issues with this, because it seems as if they're getting extraordinary powers. It may be just a demonstration of why state governments don't need to be real estate developers. But that's another topic for another day. That's my point, is that it appears like we even have a back in the back of this agreement, or this resolution or bill, that the work can still be done with General Services standing in the stead. Or am I misunderstanding that?
So I got it. Can you hear me? All right now. First of all, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and thank this body, thank this committee for the work that you're putting into this and the work that you do. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today to answer all your questions. As has already been said, this is truly a generational investment or multi-generational investment that we'll see coming into Tennessee. I think.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Ely, could you say that your name is Commissioner Ely
Oh, I'm
in for
sorry.
the record?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Butch Ely, F&A. So yeah, thank you for that. Sorry about that. But I do think part of it is, to your point, is showing good faith to Ford Motor in their belief in Tennessee, and that we can carry out what we said we would carry out. And so I think that is certainly part of it. But also, as you kind of pointed out from the mention of general services being able to move forward, we have a tremendous amount of work to do to prepare this site and get the work done that the state of Tennessee has to perform in order for this project to move forward and for it to be ready for them to be able to do what they need to do. And so I think Bobby or Commissioner can talk to this, but I think they were ready to start this month in trying to start their project. And so we simply need to get moving to go through our channels to be able to get before the building commission and do the things that we need to get approved from the building commission to be able to carry out kind of our side of the deal, to be able to be ready for them to do what they need to do. And I think that's the short answer. But I would also ask you to
excuse me before we hear from Commissioner Rolfe. The section that I was referring to in the agreement or in the House bill, the Commissioner of General Services may exercise all powers granted to the authority pursuant to this act from the effective date of this act until the date on which the Board of Directors assumes active control of the mega site authority. So it seems like we've got a backstop before the creation of this authority anyway, that to where, and I understand it's going to be a huge mass grading project. There's all kinds of things to be done out. That's a lot of dirt to be moved. And we understand that. Again, it's just, I find it curious. We've seen this now for about 72 hours. And I'm just curious as to the rush of why this authority. This seems to be something that if we appropriated money and again, and this is just somebody's told us we're going to Disney World. We're all excited, but then people told us the route we were going to take there, and it's, you have to stop and see if that's the best way to go. But that's a question that I have through this process, because I understand it seems as reading this bill that these are issues that we're imposing upon ourselves from the owner's standpoint, from the owner's representation standpoint. That Ford, we've negotiated a deal where the money, I think the ROI speaks for itself, and I look forward to supporting the appropriations bills, tomorrow, hopefully, if it comes through finance. But I'm just curious about that. That's the one thing that gives me the greatest pause in this entire thing that we're doing.
Yes, sir. So again, Bobby Rolfe, the context behind what you're asking is Ford Motor Company wanted to deal with an entity. This is a state asset. And like it or not, the state's responsible for providing utilities, which puts general services in a very different, this is really what they don't do. And some would say the state doesn't belong in the industrial site business or the industrial park business. Nonetheless, it was, in hindsight, it's going to turn out to be hopefully a great transaction. Ford Motor Company, when they decided they were coming to Tennessee, Bill Ford, on a call with Governor Lee, cited the one reason they were coming to Tennessee, and it was very simple. That in dealing with the state and its resources, it was the most buttoned up state that they dealt with of the other 15 states that we competed for this business. So were we very thoughtful about putting together a small, nimble, agile, we'll take the responsibility for the mindset behind putting that together. But again, what Ford Motor Company looked at us and said is the current Industrial Development Authority is a body of 19. It is a local community body of leaders that don't have the authority to spend a dollar and don't have a budget. And so what we thought made the most sense is it is a state asset where the state's going to be putting $1 billion at risk. And so we wanted that to fold up underneath the state and all of the obvious people that will be responsible. And at the same time, we had recommended it be nimble and agile, and that's how those ideas bubbled up. And so that's the context behind this. And like I said to you, I can promise you not a dollar will be spent of the state's taxpayer money until such time as that joint venture, because I think that's your concern, making sure that they have buttoned up their end of their part of the transaction. So I wanted to just share that with you and make sure that behind the context of how we got here, that was one of the drivers, that the state acted like one of the most buttoned up. And I think that was the big game changer to put the state of Tennessee well above those other states that they looked at. And I'll defer to.
Erin.
Good morning. I'm Erin Merrick from Governor Lee's legal office. I want to reiterate the points that Commissioner Rolfe stated, and the way I would think about the authority is that it is sort of the essence of this one-stop shopness that was so critical and so important to Ford. This is a state asset, and therefore we needed one state entity to be responsible for the management of all assets, and having the various powers here vested in the authority allows us to achieve that goal that was essential to making this deal happen. As far as the Commissioner of General Services being able to exercise these powers for a certain period, Commissioner Branscombe will be the first to tell you that she hopes that period is as short as humanly possible. There is, of course, going to be some lag time as the non-ex officio members of the board are appointed, their opportunities to come to town, have their organizational meetings, and do all of the things that are necessary and customary to find out who those people are and what they're going to be doing. So that's the reason for the particular section that you have highlighted, Chairman. But the idea is to move forward with all due haste to have the board really assume all of these roles.
Let me just
Yes, sir, Commissioner.
say one, Butch Eagley, FNA. So I think we've kind of answered this question on multiple fronts, but I think the way Erin applied this was to your point that the general services taking a role is really a backup role. I mean, we're proceeding as quickly as possible because that's what Ford expects and would like to see happen. Is it as it comes to us being able to execute on what they are expecting us to do, and so they certainly expect and would appreciate us moving forward as quickly as possible in order to be able to allow them to do what they need to do to execute on what they want to do and what we want to see happen. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. I'll ask one more question, then I'm going to let someone else. If you've got questions, please get Ben's attention to get on the list. And I understand the reason that this would be difficult for county authorities to manage, particularly the scale of it, the fact that it crosses county lines. There's a number of reasons why why having a board or a body like this makes some sense. And I can see the wisdom behind having somebody as basically the owner of the site. We can't put it out to referendum to all 7.6 million of us to see if this is a great idea when something needs to be done at the mega site. So I understand that. My question is just this: it seems like we're in the midst of undue haste to set up a really extraordinarily powerful board, kind of in a very short period of time, whenever we have other implementation mechanisms to make sure that contractors are out there on that site putting the work in that needs to be done so that they can continue to come here. Because, let's make no bones about it, we're very excited about them coming here. But I would hope that they would understand too that the in our role as that they're trading with people who take their job seriously, and that when we give them the commitment that we're not just a rubber stamp body that's going to go through and agree to everything that's presented. And I know that puts you all in tough position as negotiators. But at the same time, we certainly want to make sure that they understand that we take our job seriously, and as their corporate citizens of the great state of Tennessee, that they will have the same amount of support for us, and that their competitors will have experienced the same review and concerns whenever they have a job, but basically that they're treated fairly and thoughtfully. And with that, I'll hush for a moment until my brain recharges, and I'll think of some other fantastic questions. First up, though, Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you all for being here today. I'm extremely excited about this proposal and think it's going to be great for our state. I heard you talk a little bit about during negotiations that Ford was requesting or demanding, or I'm saying that, I'm not putting those words in your mouth necessarily, to have a smaller body and maybe a statewide body. Many up here have heard me say for my whole time here is I'm for more local control, and the body that currently exists appears to be made up of those county mayors where this is directly in their backyard, with the ability of the speaker and the governor to appoint members that could theoretically be, statewide representation. Are you saying that unless we remove that local control or the existing body, that this deal won't happen? Or is that there? I mean, do we have negotiation ability to keep the local control, to keep these local county and city mayors that, again, it's in their backyard, and keep the body more of a makeup as it currently exists? Thank you.
Bobby Roth, this was not a demand, certainly by Ford Motor Company, but a strong recommendation. And again, we understood their request. This is $1 billion state asset. And so we thought that the state should be in the position of making those decisions for the benefit of our stakeholders. So that was the mindset behind that. The challenge with the local community is that Ford Motor Company, when it came to getting any and all permits, the local communities just are they do not have the capacity to provide on a timely basis various local permits required. So again, that would fall to the state to be responsible for the permitting, and that's TDEC, and then the state fire marshal would be responsible for some of the permitting with respect to some of the construction. And then again, what made this such a challenge is this site has no water and no wastewater. And until now, we were unsuccessful in recruiting a company to come to the mega site, but for the fact that the state and the leadership and the General Assembly made the decision to move forward with additional funding. So the water and the wastewater are two very critical components. And again, that's requiring General Services, thanks to your blessings and dollars, has to deliver a water and a wastewater utility. And again, there was nobody locally that had raised their hand that had the balance sheet, the wherewithal, the capacity to deliver 4.6 million gallons a day of wastewater, and certainly the balance sheet to handle those local utilities. So that was part of the conversation as well.
Thank you for the follow-up. And I understand that, and I've done several projects, not of this scale, but I'm somewhat familiar, and I'm not really concerned with the mechanism that we're allowing for the utility authority or any of that. It's really more the makeup of the board, and is there an ability for us to empower that local board with all of the authority that you've said, instead of changing the makeup of the board? Again, I have great issue with me here in Nashville telling someone in Haywood County, what their zoning should be, or what they should be charging for a utility board. And just curious if there's some ability for us to keep that makeup the same and negotiate with them to give them the authority.
All right, so this is an important point, and thank you for bringing this up. The local communities are going to be responsible for sidewalks and schools and education and emergency services and the zoning and approval to build out housing and retail and all the things that are going to come forward with this project. And so the locals will have an enormous say of what goes on in each community. And as you know, that'll be one community may see it one way, the next community may see it another way. But when it came to making sure that we could deliver this project on time, on Ford's time, we had no choice, and that's why we came forward with the proposal. Now, with respect to the makeup, I'm going to defer to Erin and her team at the governor's office about the makeup, sir.
Good morning, Erin Merrick. One thing I'd like to highlight about this board in particular is that it will be a very involved, hardworking, boots on the ground type of board, and therefore certain levels of expertise are essential to make that happen, which we've captured, for example, by having the 3 commissioners of the most affected departments sit as members of the board. Of course, we're very concerned about the local involvement as well, because the locals are critical partners in making this happen. The way we've accounted for that in the legislation and the amendment that was put on moments ago is that the appointing authorities, which would be the governor and the 2 speakers in this case, are required to consult with the locals about who is the best to serve them as board members. So that is that's an addition that we've made in response to various comments that have been similar to yours, Representative Freeman, because that local voice is important, and they have intel about who is best and why they're best, and it's important that we have that information as well to make appointments accordingly.
Thank you, Representative Freeman. We're going to go to Representative Parkinson, but before we go to Representative Parkinson, I have one question that has hit me, and that is, who does this board answer to? I know who appoints it, but who, this Megasite Regional Authority Board, who do they answer to? Because if they're appointed by a variety of different means and mechanisms that I see in here, it seems, and again, could you define whether they're governmental, quasi-governmental, and a souped-up IDB? What exactly is this group we're calling on? And once you answer that, Ms. Merrick, we'll go to Representative Parkinson.
Great, thank you. So this structure of having the authority be administratively attached to general services, similar to what we see proliferating state government with our health boards, with our DCI boards, with things like that. It's an entity that is subject to our sunset review. It is similar to things that you've seen in those other environments where you have an independent board with its own independent board members, but is administratively attached. So it is an arm of the government in that way, and a governmental entity in that way, like, the Board of Medical Examiners, for example, similar type of structure of independence, but administratively attached and still carrying out all of these government functions.
All right, and thank you. And who would you say that they answer to? Or I guess through confirmation hearings, whether or not people are approved, what happens if they go and they start making questionable decisions that negatively affect people in the area? That what's anybody's redress with regards to the decision making of this board?
There's a removal for cause provision for members who are going off the reservation in one way or another, and that can be exercised by the rest of the board members and the governor as well. So as far as how that sort of removal is triggered, for cause is the primary oversight available there.
Leader Lamberth.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, directly to your question, this board will answer to this body, period.
Yeah.
I want to make no beans about that. I mean, when they come through the GovOps process on Sunset, they will not be treated any differently than any other entity that is. And I can assure you, any entity that has ever gone through that process knows that our GovOps committee is extremely thorough. And if there's any shenanigans or really kind of poor decisions on this particular entity, they will suffer the wrath of our government ops committee. And I know the folks on that committee, I serve on that myself, and they don't put up with anything untoward. So I am really pleased that this is in the sunset cycle. And I would encourage this new entity to talk to some of the ones that have been in existence for quite some time and to toe the line and do exactly what this body has asked them to do. So just to be a direct answer to your question, Mr. Chairman, that's who they answer to, is to us.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. And I'm fortunate that I don't have to appear before that body in my daily business dealings. But I will say this, as a practical matter of it, is that at some point in time, we're going to be giving birth to a $5.6 billion baby. And we can't dissolve this board in the midst of that. And so once this thing gets up and going, the ability to sunset it is going to be, frankly, maybe more painful than its existence. That's why if we don't get a handle on it during its creation, and hence my concern over the expedited manner in which it's being created, that's my concern, is that we want to hold up our end of this deal. Whenever we ink this deal, we want to deliver, and we want to deliver a project that is managed to the best of our ability. Especially these folks have gone out and found somebody and figured a way to pay for it and make it happen. I want us to be able to deliver our end of the deal. Again, that's my concern with it. Leader.
Yes, sir. And Mr. Chairman, I share that concern, and that's why we're here in your committee today. I will only state that there is no entity within state government that cannot go through the sunset cycle and actually sunset. And the way we do that, and I know everybody in this room knows this, but I want to say it publicly, is they would go into a wind down. And normally what we would do is, if for some reason there is an entity within state government that is critical, I mean, any of the departments, any of the entities, but one that we want to keep, but the members of that particular board are not doing their duty as they should, we put them in that wind down cycle, and many times the entire makeup of that body is then changed out. And we've done that on several entities over the years. And so I agree with you. Once this starts, it is a massive ordeal and project. But I would always encourage this body to continue to make sure that there is no entity out there that is too big for us to potentially replace. And I say that publicly, really, before the members of this body that we may approve or even appointed, because I want them to hear that loud and clearly. They will come back before us. We will be watching, and this is the taxpayers' dollars that are being invested partially in this. And so we want to make sure it's done right. So, Chairman, I just wanted to throw that out there. They will answer to you, and I want to make sure that's clear at the very start of this.
Thank you, sir. And Representative Parkinson, your patience has been duly noted. If you would, sir, please ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, commissioners and council. Appreciate you being here. Who has and this may have been partially answered in with the leader's response, but who has the oversight and decision-making authority regarding the pilots and clawbacks should the specifics of the pilots not be adhered to? And are the clawbacks automatic, and what's the process for that?
Okay, so thank you for that question. And this is going to stay right in the same fairway of how ECD transacts business on a daily basis. Every project over a certain dollar amount has an accountability agreement. And what I can report to you this morning is that of those 350 or some odd agreements that are outstanding, we have had a handful of companies come to the maturity date and not have been able to deliver the jobs. And this is a contract that's binding. And so we've turned over a couple of these to the Attorney General's office. They've pursued all their remedies. They've gone to court to sue those parties where they have not delivered on their side of the transaction. And we would see this would be no different, that this would be a contract. And again, at the end of the 10-year anniversary date, that would be the final snapshot. And if Ford Motor Company and or their joint ventures have delivered 90% of the jobs that we had incented them for, then it would be their responsibility, a legally binding obligation, to true up what they owe as far as the shortfall. So that's on the accountability agreement side. On the pilot program, as mentioned, that pilot program was negotiated. We brought the locals in and they proposed a certain pilot. So what we were proud of is the ultimate pilot that was negotiated was materially more than what the local communities had proposed. And so what happens is that after 10 years, When the accountability agreement sunsets, it's the responsibility of Ford Motor Company to deliver and continue to employ the number of jobs that they had promised. Now, there's an 80% threshold, and if they fall below that, that triggers additional payments. And so there are penalties built in. So if you go out 15 years and Ford Motor Company decides to downsize, Ford Motor Company will pay not only the pilot, but a penalty based on the number of fewer jobs that they actually reported at the end of that year. So we have hopefully protected the state and, more importantly, the local community, where that pilot over the next 30 years will not go down but go up. And again, if they shortfall their jobs, there'll be additional penalties imposed. And so we hopefully have protected not only the state from accountability perspective, but also the local community with respect to the pilot.
And if I may supplement that, Representative, with two more pieces of information. The accountability agreement that the commissioner described is something that will go through the State Building Commission for review and approval. That's set out in the legislation. Also in the legislation, you'll find that a requirement that if the pilot payment isn't made or is late or so on and so forth, and we have to go collect, or a municipality has to go collect, there's a 10% interest rate on that, which is extraordinarily to our benefit as well. So that's some extra protection in the legislation itself.
And Mr. Chair, I'm clear, who actually has the oversight? That's what my question was.
Would you mind rephrasing who has the oversight over the accountability agreement?
And the pilots, who is the actual person or the entity that's watching it?
All right, sir, Bobby Roth, ECD on the accountability agreement. And like I said, the great news is we can show you our data. We've had 20 shortfalls, probably collected 10 true ups, and the other 10 we pursued legal action. With respect to the pilot, I'm going to defer to.
It'll be the authority with respect to the pilot that sees and makes sure that those monies are distributed to the locals in the way that they should be and at the amount that they should be. And if they're not for some reason, then that creates a lien on the property, and we can go after those payments for a substantial amount of interest as well.
Okay. Mr. Chair, just a quick follow-up. No, sir. No, sir. I was trying to get the actual answer to the first question. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And remember the patience. Thank you, sir. How do we keep Ford from pulling up their heels at the end of the 30-year period should they ask for another abatement when that period ends, and we decide not to give another abatement? And what does the math say that ROI is at the end of that 30-year period? So we get to the end of the 30 years that we're offering here, and they say, hey, yeah, we want another 30 years. And we say, we don't want to do another 30 years. So they say, okay, we're going to go to Mississippi. How do we stop that? And is that written? There's something in the contract or in negotiations where we've had a conversation like that? And does the ROI say that, at the end of that 30 years, we've made our mint that we wanted to make off of this? And
Yes, sir. So Bobby Roth, so a great question. And it's a two-staged answer. Right now, at the end of 10 years, when the accountability agreement has been fulfilled under the capital grant, the $500 million capital grant, technically in 10 years and 1 day, they can exercise their right to own the fee simple dirt. So the title could leave the state and go to Ford Motor Company. That could happen 10 years and 1 day later, or it could happen at the end of the 30-year pilot, sir. So those are options that Ford would be faced with. The reality is the moment that asset transfers to Ford Motor Company, they're going to go on the local, in this case, Haywood County tax rolls. And Haywood County would impose their assessed valuation as they would assess real estate in their community. So that would be an enormous win for really all of us. It would sunset our challenges that we're concerned about with the mega site authority, because that would be one less challenge that would have to be called into question. At the end of 30 years, there's no requirement. What typically happens at the end of 30 years, I'm not aware of pilots that are extended unless there's a significant additional or expansion, additional jobs, great large CapEx. Now, the answer to the other question is Ford Motor Company, if they decide to pick up or close or do whatever, they will be responsible for all of those agreements, including all the penalties that would be assessed if they didn't fulfill their side of the obligations. And so we don't worry about, I mean, yes, is there such a scenario, sir, where all of a sudden the electric vehicle, there is something that creates no demand? Perhaps Ford Motor Company would look at other ways to use but by this point, we are comfortable that this is a viable technology. And also at this point, we've been told by Ford that not only are we going to have those two great tenants, but we should enjoy the benefit of another 12 to 15 suppliers that will come to the park, very much like what goes on at Volkswagen. And that's been a great model and a great home run. And with all of the COVID-related challenges of supply chain, it used to be that these suppliers had to provide the lowest cost and they could ship from all over the globe. Today, it's more about access, and it isn't, I need to be within 4 hours. It's, I need to be within about 2 minutes. So we're very bullish that there will be great outcomes going forward. And again, if Ford Motor Company picks up, they're going to leave about $5.6 billion of assets in the ground, because you're not going to move most all of these assets. They are going to be there for hopefully for the long run, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Todd, you've got a few questions, but before you do, again, I've got something hit my brain waves. I need to get this out there. I didn't see anywhere in this agreement that the comptroller has audit authority over this board. Who peruses their books? Who looks through their numbers? Because they do a great service for us with other large utilities around the state. So who's going to be reviewing this? Or did I just happen to miss that in the House bill?
We expect that to be part of the sunset review when this comes up in 2 years, some comptroller oversight into how their books are looking. And as the leader was suggesting, otherwise, sunset is an opportunity to lay all of this bare before the GovOps committee for you to see.
So it sounds like y'all would be amenable to an amendment that codified that into the organization of this structure. Is that fair to say? I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but I thought that I may hear some positive reaction from that. We're the kind of people that like to see things written down.
I too am the kind who likes to see things written down. So if you wanted to write that down, we'd be happy to take a look.
Mr. Chairman, Bobby Rolfe, one more observation. Now, the $500 million will go capital grant through ECD. The $40 million for the TCAT will go through TBR. The up to $200 million for this additional TDOT. And so all of those entities are open to audits every day, sir. So for those larger significant dollars, you already have the mechanisms in place. But your question is specifically that mega site authority and those resources. The good news is they are relatively minor compared to where most of the capital is going to be spent, sir.
I understand. It's just I can't get this again. We're rushing to create this authority, and I'm struggling with that. But I'll poll my colleagues, and we'll see if that might need to be some amendment language that gets on this bill. Again, Leader Gant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One thing I wanted to reiterate as well, too, and Bobby, you correct me if I'm wrong, but the payments from the pilot are not actually made to the locals by the authority. That comes from Ford directly to the locals, correct?
You want to talk about the mechanics?
Yes. So the pilot payments are not dollars coming into the authority. The pilot payments are dollars going to the locals. And the authority has a role to play in determining how many of those dollars go to which of the locals, but the actual money is from Ford to locals.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your concern about the timing of this. I did note in the language of the bill that the authority given to general services only happens if we pass this bill. So they can't take over or do anything until we pass this bill. So the whole thing, I guess, has to be implemented. That was just, as they explained, I guess, just a temporary mechanism, and I guess that's necessary. My primary question, and I guess I'm going to ask a follow-up first to a previous comment and question, and that's dealing with the clawbacks. You mentioned that after, at the 10-year time frame when this is assessed to see if they brought the 90% of the total promised jobs, is that some kind of a sliding scale that there would be a penalty assessed if there was a penalty to be assessed?
Bobby Rolfe again. So the short answer is Ford Motor Company has made the decision. Our clawbacks and the accountability agreements, historically, you're talking about this sliding scale of taking the average of the last 3 years that accountability agreement was in place. We thought this was a good decision, and we encouraged Ford to think it was a great decision, that on the 10th anniversary date, that's when we score the jobs that are on the payroll at that date. And if there is a shortfall below the 90% threshold, there's a true up. And I'm just going to not get into a whole lot of heavy math, but for the sake of this conversation, if they deliver 87% of the jobs of the 100%, 87%, they would owe a 13% penalty to the state for under delivering the number of jobs that they had promised the state they were going to deliver, sir.
Okay, that certainly gets to the question. The primary thing that I wanted to ask you, and I'd love to have some assurance, because I think this particular point will be something that will be made in the contract with Ford and the joint venture. And that's concerning during the construction period, which most of our money is going toward the capital outlay of this project. But I would like to have the assurance for the General Assembly to have the assurance that the contract would be negotiated such that even non-union contractors and subcontractors, which probably make up the majority in our area in West Tennessee, have equal access to the subcontracts on this project, that there would be no provision that would require you to, number one, either be a union shop to be a subcontractor, or number two, pay union wages or pay the union a certain percentage of the project of your subcontract. Can you provide that assurance?
So, Chairman, we are unable to. We can encourage our customers to follow the local practices, but I can assure you, if we wrote into the accountability agreement that the state was going to be dictating certain requirements, whatever they may be, that would likely be a deal killer for this project. And I share that with you with the following context. This company is from Detroit. It's 100 and some odd years old. Most of their great assets are in Detroit. But one of the reasons that they looked away from Detroit was for just this reason. And that is that there were not a lot of requirements. For example, in Detroit, it's a requirement that 51% of the contracts be spent on whatever they define inside that city for certain union, whatever the formulary is. And so what we know is that Ford Motor Company is a great company. Ford Motor Company, probably the great global brand. If we could ever have gone out and picked one company to come to the mega site, ladies and gentlemen, I promise you, it would be Ford Motor Company. And I say that to you because there's sensitivity to all the practices that you're speaking to. They are enormously sensitive to what goes on in the local community. They're enormously sensitive to what goes on in Memphis, and they're there because of the proximity of Memphis and also what goes on in Jackson. And so this is a tight balancing act. And yes, sir, the short answer is if we write into this contract that we're going to place certain thresholds, I can't speak for Ford Motor Company. At the same time, they've given us their assurances. Exhibit A, this large contract that they're getting ready to let to prepare the site. They've reached out to General Services and their team to ask for what Tennessee contractors, because they don't want to they left a market, and this is like these other companies. They're leaving other markets to come to Tennessee because thankfully we are such a pro-business friendly state. But again, Exhibit A is this grading contract. They've asked for Tennessee contractors.
Mr. Chairman, just so I'm not misunderstood in the question, and I appreciate you answering the way you did,
This would be called a clarification, I
Yeah,
believe,
this
is
is a
the new term we've
clarification. Yes,
added
sir.
to it.
and I'm not asking to put requirements on the contract. I'm asking to put preventions of requirements in the contract so that they cannot strictly require union contractors or union wages to be paid, that they would not have that requirement on there.
That in all of our negotiation and conversation has not been a part of any conversation, sir, about that sensitivity. And so we, again, have picked, this is a partnership. Please know, we've looked, and we approached this from the beginning of our conversations to winning this conversation, that this is a partnership. And what I'm hearing you say is we, the General Assembly, would be uncomfortable if Ford were to show up and to insist on only engaging subcontractors that have union representation. And I can assure you that's not been a part of any conversation that we've had. And I am going to take Ford Motor Company as a partner with the state of Tennessee to make sure that they would be very sensitive to that.
Thank you, Commissioner. And now that you piqued my interest, because I got a bunch of them dirt moving boys and girls in my district, so I need to find out who they're talking to so that I can refer them to some fine, heavy contractors who are very anxious to get started. Chairman Bricken.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, and it's probably to Commissioner Ely, I guess, but it deals with the formation of this authority. Before, I guess, this body creates such an authority, has a pro forma operating budget for the authority been put together already that we can see over the next couple of years on how it's going to operate, what kind of expenditures and what kind of funding that authority might take? So do we have that this body can look at?
Thank you, sir. Yes, Chairman, we have looked at the budget for the authority, and of course, a lot of what we're looking at is forecast at this point, and General Services has been helping on that. But we have, as part of the appropriations bill that you have before you, you can see in Section 1 that we have a sum of $675,000 that would be for the administration of that authority. And so that includes, and I think Fiscal Review has and the Legislative Office has the background for those dollars, but that represents 8 months of operations, because this would contemplate that this would be started by November the 1st. And so that 675,000 represents 8 months of a year that would carry us through, and then we would appropriate what would be necessary for the following year in the budget cycle to do that. But that includes a CEO, an assistant, or and then whatever travel and meetings would be necessary, as well as kind of minimal office space. There is some conversation about possibly being able to utilize the TCAT to be able to have some office space within the TCAT to be able to be operational. But that would be what we're estimating at this point to be the expense for the authority itself to operate.
Just as a clarification, so Fiscal Review has some details for that $675,000 that we can get, or can they provide us?
Yes.
Yes,
sir.
but that's just for an eight months.
That's 8 months of operations to 675. But yes, sir, my understanding is that all of that backup that was provided by General Services as part of this would be detailed in that information.
All right. That's fine.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Yeah, and if you have any further questions, certainly we'll be happy to respond to them today to
Thank
make
you.
sure you have that information. Yes, sir.
All righty, next on our list is Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this is not a question, but part of my opening statement. When we talk about how excited, elated, almost happy about where we are today. And Mr. Chairman, if you could take the responsibility and authority of telling us when we can participate in the opening ceremonies at the site. Because I think that's where we want to go and that's where we need to be. It reminds me of sort of like a relay race. And I remember, as Representative Gant said, conversations probably started in the 90s. But in 2007, I think that's when probably the first bill was introduced, bipartisan bill. Lieutenant Ramsey, Lieutenant Governor at the time, and Bredesen was governor, and Speaker Jimmy Nathie. So once, pow, the pistol, we took off running. And for 14 years, we've been passing that baton by continuously funding this operation. So we are here today. And it was a bipartisan approach at that time. And which brings to my question, currently in the language, the board is made up of 7 individuals. And it seems as if the governor actually gets 5 appointments and the other 2 appointments are the speaker and the lieutenant governor. My question to each of you all, and it maybe put you on the spot a little bit, but would you have a problem with expanding that board?
Yes, sir. If I could go first, Bobby Rolfe with ECD. The spirit of the negotiations with Ford, they just ask that that board makeup be represent a nimble and agile board that can make decisions quickly because of the various permitting and requirements of all the things that have to be done. And then they ask that it just be made up of professional people that will be responsible for the success of the park. And so that's why we started with ECD and F&A and General Services as those commissioners, because it will be those 3 departments that are going to be responsible for make sure we deliver everything. And it's really not only in the early years, but as other companies come to the park, it'll be up to the team I work with every day at ECD to recruit, Alan and his team to recruit additional companies that may need some additional infrastructure, that would require some services from General Services. With respect to the overall makeup, again, the request is that body be smaller versus larger, sir. That was what Ford Motor Company had asked.
And on a lighter note, Commissioner, as a follow-up, you're not suggesting that elected officials are not nimble and agile and quick thinkers. You're not suggesting that, are you?
No, sir, because 4 of those appointments, I believe, would probably fall into that category, sir.
I'll come back later, Mr. Chairman, with some other questions.
Thank you, Representative Miller. Representative Griffey, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Roth, I just wanted to comment that, you've got decades of experience in doing in business and industrial development and attracting businesses to the state of Tennessee. Tennessee is actually probably a rock star on attracting new businesses and industry to come to our state, primarily a lot to do with the policies that this General Assembly has set for the state over a number of years. But you're acutely a rock star for what you've done for Tennessee is your service, and we're all deeply grateful for that. But this is your area. You're the professional, and would you just tell us what this is going to mean for Tennessee overall, and particularly West Tennessee?
Yes, sir. So thank you for that question. Again, Bobby Rolfe. And yes, sir, for my first 18 years, I did serve as an investment banker and then ran a whole host of small to medium-sized businesses before I made the decision to come to the state and provide 4.5 years now of great public service. I will say simply that this we've had some great wins, sir. And I go back to, I remember the first big marquee win, certainly as long as I've been there, and it was Alliance Bernstein moving their HQ from Midtown Manhattan, a great $600 billion asset manager. And then it was Amazon, and we were just ecstatic about that. And then all of a sudden, we showed up with a company called Oracle. So it goes back to having a great product, and the great product's a byproduct of great pro-business friendly policies. And what's been so fun to represent the state with the team I work with in recruiting all over the globe is we do have a great product, sir. So that makes it easy. With respect to these economics, I can tell you this project, I think, will be so historical and will deliver such a return on investment. And like I said, our modeling is simply a static model. It really doesn't take into consideration inflation, wage inflation. It doesn't take into consideration these 12 to 14 other suppliers. It doesn't take into consideration the growth that's going to happen around this campus. And it's not going to be just Hayward County. It's not going to be just Fayette County. It's going to be Lauderdale. It's going to be Shelby County. It'll be Madison County. It'll be all of these counties. Because at the end of the day, the workers that they are going to be recruiting to come to this plant, the wages are so fantastic, it will be a game changer. And I say that to you. Governor Lee asks us all the time at ECD, go out and recruit companies that are going to pay family wages. And sir, what's so exciting about these wages is these wages are enough to say, you know what, there's a room in the budget for maybe a boat, an extra car, a vacation. So if we sound a little bit excited, I promise you, we really are. And it is going to change our state. And I go back to how we got to this point. And it goes back to several years of great planning that go back 14 years, and we are finally here. And I can just assure you that, as I said at the outset, when we were negotiating this transaction at ECD, and again, this is a team of 12 with outside counsel, making sure that we did everything we could to protect all of us as state taxpayers and stakeholders, sir. So again, if I sound just a little bit excited, it's only because I work with such a great team at ECD that has delivered such a great asset. And again, one last comment. With respect to the electric vehicle revolution, as you know, General Motors is now going to build their Cadillac Lyriq, and they're going to spend $2.2 billion in Spring Hill. And then the battery joint venture, another $2.3 billion. And then Volkswagen says, you know what, we're going to spend another $800 million to build our first electric vehicle. So the great news is, while we have been home to the internal combustion engine and been very successful, 1,000 companies call Tennessee home that are a part of this automotive ecosystem. And now we're going to be positioned in the next, which is the new evolution, and this is electric vehicle. And then we want another battery. And so what I want you guys to know is we have had some great opportunities, and we've missed some opportunities. The Mazda Toyota joint venture was one that ended up in Huntsville. Now, while we lost that project, 5 companies so far have called Tennessee home that are suppliers. So we have won indirectly. And now this would be the Super Bowl of wins, sir, that we could only dream about. And I say that to you because everybody across the globe in the automobile business is trying to determine how you provide the electric vehicle. There are no less than 23 startup EV companies, and I believe half of them have come to us and knocked on our door. And I have told our team at ECD and Governor Lee and his team, let's be thoughtful about who we recruit, because all these great startups have the capital to build the plant, but the real capital is the balance sheet that can afford the working capital and setting up the dealer network. That's where the work is, and that's where that capital runs short. So again, ladies and gentlemen, if I sound just a bit excited, please forgive me for that excitement, because this really is something that we will all be so proud of. We have to do it right. We have to protect the state, the taxpayers, and you guys. We want you to pressure test what we've done in negotiating that MOU. But needless to say, sir, a bit excited.
Chairman. Thank you very much, Commissioner Roth. I deeply appreciate that. I do have one concern I want to share with you, and maybe I can get you to alleviate some of my concerns. That with the Ford deal and SK Innovation Battery Innovations, some folks are concerned that that deal may suck up some of the ECD dollars that might go to counties around the area in West Tennessee. I've got Dana Corporation in Henry County, and Dana actually makes electric drive motors for heavy equipment, light vehicles, everything like that. We've got Plumley Raguno automotive rubber manufacturer. We've got Jones Plastic in Benton County. Can I get you still commit that ECD is not going to overlook these companies if they have an ability to expand or maybe put a new division in these, because I'm less than 2 hours away from the deal. And I would think that would be extremely attractive for Ford Motor Company. And what, if there's anything we can do to try to get some of our local manufacturers hooked up with Ford. So thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. So very briefly, Bobby Rolfe again. So the short answer is, thanks to this General Assembly, you have always funded all of our projects. And I ask our team every day to continue to recruit like there's no tomorrow, because at some point we're going to have another recession. And I say to the team, we want as many great companies calling Tennessee home, because one day when that next recession hits, it'll be a softer landing for Tennesseans, we hope. I can promise you, these companies that have been a part of the internal combustion engine world, they are all actively looking at how they reformulate, retool, re-strategize to be relative in the future. And I can promise you, we will recruit all of these companies. Again, especially the companies that already call Tennessee home. What I want you to know is when they have a phase 2 or phase 3, we treat them with the same enthusiasm, with the same kind of incentives as we do a new company coming to Tennessee. So the great news is we're not shortcutting anybody. And I promise you, as long as you will fund the department I work for and this team, because what we do have is a great recruiting team, goes back to having a great product. So the answer is yes, sir.
Commissioner Ely, I see you down there.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, let me just add one thing to the commissioner's excitement. One of the great things about this is, as has been mentioned, this body has been so financially prudent over the years, and because of the actions that this body took over the last 2 years to prepare us for what we didn't know might happen with COVID, and the quick actions that were taken, we find ourselves in a tremendously positive position today. We have over collected during the 21 fiscal year, approximately $2.1 billion of over collections. And so every dollar that we're talking about here, we're going to be able to deal with through cash. We'll be able to make these investments. There was one word, I think, that represents this MOU and this deal is investment in the future, as y'all are saying. And so this $800+ million is all going to be able to be dealt with cash that we have on hand from our over collections during this past year because of the actions that this body took. And so this will take not a single dollar away from ECD or frankly, or any of the other departments that we have here that you represent. So I just want to make sure everybody knew where these dollars were coming from, and that we're not going to borrow 1 cent, $1 to be able to effectuate this deal.
Thank you, Commissioner. And not all of my colleagues up here were able to attend a fine institution like I was. Memphis State University. So I did some amateur math on it. And when you look at our investment, the contribution per man, woman, and child, even the fact that we've got it on hand, that's even more of a bonus. But we're talking less than $125 a person in the state of Tennessee that's going to change the trajectory of an entire region. And so the ROI on that is spectacular. And again, that's the easy, to me, that's the easy part of this. Of our entire conversation. And I'd like to say, Commissioner Rolfe, we're some of your biggest cheerleaders. Of course, not everyone's a 2-time national collegiate cheerleading champion either, but that's okay. They do the best they can. But as we dig into this, And we've got a couple more people on here. And just for you guys and ladies, for housekeeping notes, what we're going to do today is these very important, fine folks are going to have to go spend some time with our Senate colleagues. And so we've also got some other public testimony we're going to hear on this matter. And so we're going to take a short recess here coming up, and then we're going to come back after lunch to finish our conversations and look at seeing how we want to handle this. So that's just for everybody's understanding. I see in here, could someone address, no, I'm going to stick to my thing. I'm going to ask my questions last. Chairman White.
Thank you, Chairman. I also went to Memphis State University, or University of Memphis.
You did that math too, didn't you?
Absolutely, absolutely. Before I ask my question, it'd be a quick one. I also want to add to what I'm excited about is what this is going to do for our research, our universities. University of Memphis on one end, UTK on the other end, the research dollars that are bringing in. I was up at the University of Tennessee about a week ago visiting the engineering department, and they already have the students designing what's the best platform to recharge these vehicles. And it's just fascinating to watch some of the ideas coming out. So the research dollars that's going to come in for our institutions is great. I wanted to ask a fiscal question, if I may, Mr. Chairman, just to make sure I'm on the same page. Leader Gant, when he started his comments out, he said we will benefit about $1.2 billion in annual payroll. Did also understand 3.5 billion in general revenue would come into the state from this annually. Is that correct, or did I misunderstand?
I think.
Yes, sir. So,
You know.
Mr. Chairman, Bobby Rolfe, again, so this was all modeled through our research team. And so what we're speaking of, how we've modeled this is based on the number of net new jobs being created. The annual payroll will far exceed $1 billion a year. So that's payroll that goes to Tennessee workers, which I think, will we have some people that'll commute outside of a 45-mile radius? Maybe. But yes, sir. So that would be the annual payroll that would be generated for workers that live close to or within proximity of the mega site. So that's the first data point. The $3.5 billion, that's an annual gross domestic, think of GDP. Okay. And I'm going to try to put it in the right context. But if we look at our advanced manufacturing GDP across the state, the output of goods and services, for the sake of this conversation, is about $75 billion a year across the state. This mega site will generate about $3.5 billion a year on top of that. So think of that as economic output. And so how do you measure? Is that a great GDP output? Is that a great success? I can tell you it will far exceed any other entity in our state that drives and produces GDP, gross domestic product output.
Which would directly benefit these local communities.
Yes, sir. And one other comment that I think is important that we would want you to know that we're mindful of is there's going to be a great opportunity to generate some real economic prosperity in a more agricultural area. And also, Ford Motor Company is very intentional about making sure that Memphis, Tennessee wins and Jackson wins and these other, because like I said at the outset, let's be clear, they are coming here because of the access to all the great assets in Memphis, Tennessee. World-class airport, world-class port, world-class education, world-class living, world-class experience. And so there'll be a whole economy that I think will grow, because this is not a company that's going to be going out and reaching out. And they're going to want to make sure that a lot of the suppliers and a lot of their partners, because you know what, it's great to buy certain parts, but then you've got to buy all the ancillary services that wrap around supporting a $5.6 billion asset that's going to be home to 5,760 employees. So there will be this enormous ripple effect that I think the entire region, and yes, there are going to be other parts of the state that are making other parts that will be also shipping their product in, because again, the supplier network for an electric vehicle looks very different than a supplier network for we call it the ICE, the internal combustion engine, sir.
Thank you.
Chairman Powers, you're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just let me mention how lucky we are in this extraordinary session to have an extraordinary chairman of our committee. Did you hear that? I was hoping to get 3 or 4 follow-ups with that. But anyway, this is probably going to Commissioner Ely, and thank you all, first of all, for being here and coming out today, and we appreciate your insight. Commissioner Ely, I was not fortunate enough to go to Memphis State University. I went to the University of Tennessee. But one thing that we learned over there, we keep talking about ROI. One thing that people mention, and I've heard others talk about the number of years, and actually ROI, as I know it, return on investment, is based on a percentage. What we're talking about, I think we're getting confused a little bit at a break-even point. You know, the break-even point is a number of years it takes to break even from this investment, whereas ROI, as you know it, is actually a percentage based on return of investment. So could you give us a little bit of clarification on that and what those numbers really are?
Yeah. Well, I would say you're correct. There's a lot of different ways to look at this. And I'll refer back over to Commissioner here because his team really put the numbers to this when we were looking at ROI in the structure of the deal that we did. But I would just say this: we've done a lot of deals in the state of Tennessee, and to me, this deal by far is going to have more positive impact on the entire state, but certainly our western part of the state than anything that we've been able to do before. And so we can slice and dice and look at how you run ROI or how you look at, but there is no doubt in my mind that this will have a positive impact on the people of the state sooner than later. And I mean, I look at it in terms of, the 3.5 billion that Chairman said for gross product, added product to our state. We will more than get our value out of these investments that we're making here if this body takes the action that we're hoping to tomorrow. So you want to add to that?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Butch. That's a great, very quickly, because again, we track data. That's what we ask our team to do every day. And so this was an important, good conversation to have. But I think Leader Gant had mentioned this at the outset. Just take the revenue for the state during construction, and this is sales tax revenues. The state picks up a supermajority, and then the local communities also pick up a percentage. The state, just during construction, close to $180 million will come back to the state Department of Revenue. The local communities, about $70 million. Now, that's not just in Haywood County. That would be Memphis, Tennessee, wherever. And I'm not going to go through, but that's our modeling there. And then on an annual basis, the state taxes generated, again, a static model without any inflation or expansion or additional companies that would come here, will generate about $22 million a year for the state in perpetuity. And then the county and the local communities of close to $7 million. And then the pilot program, the $269 million that Ford Motor Company and their joint venture partner are going to pay in lieu of taxes. It will go to the local communities. That would be $269 million. So those are some of the local data points. What I cannot tell you is what I'll call this ripple, this multiplier effect of how it's going to impact, because all the local communities, people are going to be building new homes, we hope, new retail, we hope new hospitality, we hope all those rich assets will come out of the ground. And that's not been factored into this multiplier effect of what that's going to do, not only for state revenue, but also for the local communities, the sales tax, the property taxes, et cetera.
Okay, thank you. And a follow-up on that, and going back to that point, and I appreciate that. And going back to that point, a lot of my colleagues here and in the legislature, we're not from West Tennessee. So when we go back to East Tennessee or wherever my colleagues might be from, and we're trying to tell our constituents why this is a great investment, and even though it's all going, to West Tennessee, but why it's a great investment for our area too. Why we voted for this bill. What would you think would be the best explanation for that when we go back and talk to our constituents about that?
Very good question, sir. Again, Bobby Rolfe. I think the short answer to this is whether it's great for West Tennessee, Central or Middle Tennessee or East Tennessee, the state wins. The state wins based on this investment. Whenever a company would decide to put $5.6 billion, and that's just warming up the engines, no pun intended, because of what's going to happen later.
Engines.
And we hope, well, electric engines, I'm not sure you warm those up. I don't own one. I have a Tahoe, thanks to my friends in General Services. But my point to you is, that is a great question. How does the rest of the state win? Well, the rest of the state will win because, again, the prosperity that's going to happen beginning in West Tennessee, rising tide, boats all rise. And also, I think the supplier network across the state. Now, remember, we're home to 1,000 companies that are part of the automotive ecosystem.
Right.
Now, will all of them, if you're making mufflers today, I'm not sure you want to be in the muffler business, or the drivetrains of today are going to look different. So this will require, so I can not pick on, but I think of what's going on at Denso. That's the number one greatest tier one supplier. And they are part of this electric revolution. It's a Japanese company. I think they have 6,000 employees
In Maryville,
and a great company. Well, you know what? Every time another company comes to Tennessee, and I think what I want all of us to be so mindful of is having an OEM in your state is just gold, because it creates this whole supplier network, and all the suppliers rely on other suppliers. And then you've got all the companies that have to support those companies. And then you've got all the other services wrapped around supporting people. And so I can just simply say that it is going to be an enormous win for everybody in this state.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Chairman Bricken, you thought of something else over there? You are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going back to the authority, the water and wastewater utility of this, I mean, in reading the legislation, it's certainly the primary focus is to provide water and wastewater to the mega site. But it certainly has provisions for the wastewater and water services to expand to be a public water and wastewater utility to service the counties and municipalities around it. Is the plan to build the water and wastewater for that capacity just for the site or beyond the site? If you could clarify that.
Yes, sir. So Bobby Rolfe again, sir. The short answer is we have asked General Services to upsize the wastewater distribution because of what we are anticipating is the demand at the mega site. So as there is wastewater discharge created, the plan is for General Services, who really is not in this business, but to build a wastewater treatment plant on the campus. So whatever discharge is there will be treated, and then it will be pumped to the Mississippi. And the great news is we've spent years working on getting all of those permits, getting all of those easements. So the short answer is we started with 3.5 million gallons of wastewater, and we've asked General Services, which they've been a fabulous partner here, sir, to upsize it to about 4.6 million. Based on the demands of the users at the mega site, we feel like they will be using that capacity. Now, if we learn in a handful of years that there is some great technology to recycle and there is a reduction, I would defer to our friends at General Services about providing additional assistance to the local communities with respect to this wastewater discharge.
John, anything you would add?
Good morning, John. Good morning, John Hull. I'm the Deputy Commissioner in General Services. So Commissioner Rolfe is absolutely right. We are building the system today for 4.6 million gallons. So as we confirm what Ford will need or another tenant at the mega site, we'll just have to see what additional capacity might be there at that point. But that's the base, certainly, is to design a system to service those tenants on the mega site.
Just the wastewater. What about the water supply side? Is there extra capacity coming in that could service communities, or is it strictly for the mega site?
But right now, the water system that we are putting in is certainly for the tenants on the mega site. The great news there is we're sitting on an aquifer, so there's lots of water under the ground. So that can certainly be expanded over time as well.
Thank you, sir. Leader Gant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make a clarification, and Commissioner, correct me if I'm wrong, but other tenants will actually pay to connect to the wastewater system themselves, correct?
Yes, sir, Bobby Rolfe, and Leader, that is correct. We are going to build and bring these utilities to the campus, water, wastewater, but it is going to be the responsibility of not only Ford Motor, but SK Innovations and the other suppliers. And you mentioned at the outset that there are 500 acres that are not part of this OEM campus that Alan and his team are continuing to market. And so while we're waiting to know if we're going to land that particular asset, that will also be in this calculation of how much water and wastewater will be needed.
Thank you, Commissioner. When the Deputy Commissioner came up, he piqued my interest. He hit one of those points that I have a question about, and that is with the extraordinary authority that's being given to this mega site authority, and the fact that it is sitting over an aquifer. I see here that this body it appears to me it has the ability to determine what's noxious. I think that's a zoning term, but whenever you consider batteries, battery manufacturing, particularly battery recycling, that's pretty, that can, for those who, let's just say, aren't very good at it, can create ancillary problems. And the fact that this site is sitting over Memphis Sands aquifer, I want to make sure that the authority's authority does not supersede TDEC with regards to any environmental regulation with regards to their normal course of duty. Is that, I saw a nod and I like nods, but is that indeed the case?
Aaron Merrick again. Yes, Chairman, TDEC will continue to have its regulatory powers over the activities that go on at the the activities that go on at the mega site, recycling batteries among any other host of things that may develop.
Okay, good. I didn't want the mega site authority to be in charge of issuing their own permits and doing their own monitoring and that type of.
And Mr. Chair, if I could just add, there is a third leg to the stool, and that is a great partner that is not owned by Ford, that is in the recycling business for just what you're speaking of. And they plan to hopefully come to the mega site and be a part of, because as I think we all heard Bill Ford say at that announcement, that they hope to be 100% sustainable, and they are so sensitive to the environment, and they're so sensitive to making sure that they're a great corporate citizen. And so there's so much new technology out there, and it really is about recycling. And it is, we have, Alan Board and I have been to several battery manufacturers across the globe to recruit those companies to Tennessee, and they have this enormous ability to have a closed system, which means they are recycling absolutely everything. And so there is the technology emerges. We are all hopeful that there will be less waste, if you will, as we roll forward.
Yes, sir. And I thought I heard Mr. Ford say that day, that glorious day down at Shelby Farms, but then I also just heard 4.6 million gallons of wastewater. So that seems to be a little bit of a breach in the closed system, at least at the present time.
Sir, I did not question Bill Ford. We're glad to have him in our city, in our county, in our state, sir. But I heard the same.
Amen.
Yes, sir.
Amen to the welcome. Shout out to all the Fords that might be among us. We appreciate you. We are going to hear from Dr. Ramsey, and then I will close our questioning, and then we will go for a recess. We'll coordinate with our guests to see what their commitments on the Senate side, see what they've got there, and then I will reconvene to hear some more testimony with regards to some open records. So Dr. Bob, excuse me, Chairman Ramsey, you're recognized.
And then thank you, Mr. Chairman. And certainly my name was not mentioned in the testimony. However, my district was, and in a very positive light. And the Denso Corporation I have spoken to them, and for those who are in separate parts of the state, they are absolutely thrilled that the Ford Company is coming to Tennessee, and they could not be more supportive. And they said, tell Alan Borden hello when I come. So thank you very much, Commissioner Roth, and I appreciate that reference.
All right, now then, back to this. We have patted ourselves on the backs. We have celebrated. We have taken victory laps on this, but back to this pesky bill that's in front of us. And one of the items that I notice in here is on page 7. We're giving these folks the right to condemn property. That is something not to be entered into lightly, a lot like marriage is not to be entered into lightly. The reason I say that is I heard that term this weekend. I went to a wedding. Explain to me the process. I know that whenever land is condemned, it winds up being, I guess, adjudicated in front of, I guess, Chancery Court. With those, and I understand that if utilities are necessary or right-of-ways necessary, that sometimes condemnation has to take place. Could you share with us what is being contemplated with regards to this right of condemnation?
Yes, Aaron Merrick, I can handle that for you, Mr. Chairman. As far as the process that you described about courts being involved and so on and so forth, that is captured in the last sentence of the subsection A12 about the ability to exercise this power pursuant to any applicable statutory provision. That is pretty standard language for a lot of these express grants of condemnation power. And the essence there is that whatever due process structures are set up in statute for an entity to exercise its due process, those are the procedures that are available for us to follow. As far as what may potentially be condemned or what we're thinking about in the course of condemnation here, it's for what I would describe as yet unforeseen needs for a type of, suppose it's an expansion of the water or the wastewater systems or the pipe or the discharge at the Mississippi River or any of those sorts of things where we need access to get a right of way to make the outspout at the Mississippi River bigger, or we need to make a pipe bigger to handle extra capacity or things of that nature. It could be we need to take core samples of land before we can expand the pipe in that area. So it's those types of things that are consistent with the condemnation power that we've exercised to get the pipe, in the ground to date. We have a lot of rights of ways already to make this happen, and it's just a continuation of that power.
Thank you. I understand that, and that's again, this whole rush between this. I would like to see that reviewed in here, because what makes me concerned is that we've got this mega site authority there who's sitting upon condemnation powers, and we have a patient private landowner who's wanting to develop a close to the mega site industrial facility themselves, and suddenly the mega site authority decides that they have a tenant that's on their that could fit on their property, and they want to condemn an extra 300 acres. That's the kind of thing that concerns me. If we could change do a little wordsmithing here to say that we're to allow access for transportation, utility access, those type things. I just don't want this to become a land hungry beast that continues to grow, and again, short circuits the private model that I care so much about.
I understand. I am not aware of any intention to expand what we describe in the bill as the initial megasite property, which is about the 4,100 acres. That's not something that I understand to be contemplated at this point.
But you do see how that could be, with the way this is worded, how that could be a concern.
Bobby Roth. Yes, sir. The short answer is that the state has already exercised its rights for condemnation for easements. I think 120 different families. And this was to make sure that the pipeline to the Mississippi, and when we're talking about condemnation, we're really talking about easements. And we're talking about, burrowing or burying an 18-inch pipe across private land. And so we spent 2 years paying those private landowners. So that was focused on wastewater. There could be a scenario, and I know I get a sense for what how you're directing that question. You don't want the mega site to just continue to condemn land so that the park becomes a larger park. At the same time, we are grateful for this language, because if we need to expand our water or wastewater utilities or decide that we have extra capacity, or the authority has extra capacity to send or treat or do something else, whether it's to other local utilities or to the Mississippi River, I think that was the intent, sir.
And I understand that, and those are all positive things for the community. But again, sometimes these words can be pesky things. They if we don't have enough of them, people can fill the vacuum. The last thing that I'd like to point out is, and this is one of my reasons for bringing this up, is the very following paragraph that says that this board will do and perform each and every act and thing and have and exercise each and every power that the board and the board's sole discretion deems necessary, convenient, or appropriate to accomplish the purposes of this chapter. And then the inclusion of a specific power in this chapter does not limit the broad general powers granted to the authority. The exercise of the authority's powers, including but not limited to the powers with respect to the disposition, development, encumbrance, lease, sublease, or improvement of state property, are exclusive and are not subject to further approval, except as expressly provided. That is a wide way to go through. That's a lot of power and authority and a lot of words that are put in there to say that we can do basically anything we want. And that's scary. That particular paragraph immediately following condemnation seems to not match up with the fact that we're trying to keep specific what we're doing. And again, it's all in today. We're all about the betterment of the community. We're all about it. And everything that has been said from you folks down there has been correct, factually correct. And I appreciate that. But this is some very, very broad authority that's being asked, that just in 2 paragraphs, there's no limitations. And so I would ask respectfully that, and again, we're not this is a heck of a position to be in. The cow has left the barn, and we're trying to figure out if we were ready for it to go. But that just gives me, though, that catch-all phrase could catch a lot more than just our intentions today. That would be my point. And so with that, and I know that's not nobody in this room's intention, but you know what? In 10 years, we'll have a different governor. I can assure you you'll have a different chairman of the Commerce Committee. And so we will not be the same people sitting here, but you know what? The people still living in West Tennessee around this mega site will still be living there. Commissioner Ely.
I know we've had discussion about this already to some degree, but I would reiterate that what was said earlier. Leader Lamberth also pointed this out in his remarks. At the end of the day, everything that we do is still going to be subject to the oversight of this body, and will come before GovOps as a sunset. And so ultimately, you will have the ability to guide the actions of this authority. You have the ability, along with the governor, to make the appointments. I say this, the speakers of the Senate and Speaker of the House. And so I would, the reasoning that we put forth, I think in the legal language, is just simply to be able to execute on the simple matter that we're trying to accomplish, is to get this site ready to be able to occupy in a time frame that has been indicated by Commissioner Rolfe. So I would still say that, as we've said, that that this body through its committees will be able to have that oversight that you're looking for, and that is the safeguard that trumps any of the language you're concerned about.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. And again, I want to clarify and be perfectly clear about this, is that my concerns about the haste in which this very powerful authority is being brought about and brought into existence in no way colors the excitement that we've got for the transformation that this project brings to our area. The work that's been done is appreciated and valued. And so we look forward to trying to get this to where we can all participate in the victory parade. But this wording is concerning to me. I'm going to go to Leader Lamberth, and then we're going to step into a recess and reconvene this afternoon to hear additional testimony, and then have discussion amongst ourselves, and then hopefully put this before a vote. Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I feel like we didn't coordinate beforehand, but I feel like we're sharing the same script today because, quite frankly, many of your questions are questions that I have asked. And on the eminent domain issue, there is a sentence in there I wanted to highlight on page 8 of the bill. It says, condemnation by the authority may not interfere with prior public use of the property interest that is being condemned. That protects quite a few of the entities surrounding there. And I will tell you that our statutes that are currently in place obviously can be changed by this body. And it makes it very clear that the power that's confirmed may only be exercised pursuant to any applicable statutory provision now in force or later enacted. And that is something that I think all of us take very, very seriously, is anytime we grant eminent domain power to an entity. But the only thing we're granting is the ability to begin that process. That's still going to have to go before a judge. That's still going to have a hearing. Any entity that has the power of eminent domain has to prove their case. And I have rarely seen it, just as an attorney, be extended beyond, roads, power, sewer lines, that type of thing. And in fact, I think some of our statutes include much of that in there. And there's a really large amount of case law that says where an entity can go and where they cannot. And I just wanted to kind of get this on the record, that just because an entity, this mega site authority or anyone else, feels that they wish to have or want to have property around them, that's not how you are able to access additional property. You have to prove your case. And those statutes can be set by this body and have been and will continue to be. So, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to highlight that there's both a lot of statutes that already apply to that and will apply to this mega site authority, and any future statutes that if we were to see, again, any untoward usage of this particular power granted, we can actually change that. And this bill says that any future changes, they would be held to as well. So just wanted to kind of highlight that because you went right to the meat of concern that I had very early on. And then the language of this kind of put that to ease in my mind. But it's a very serious power even to begin that process that we're granting upon them. So we're almost setting up, again, and this is what makes sense in my mind, a small city or county. I mean, it's a state property. We purchased it. We didn't use eminent domain at the beginning, but it doesn't have any of the amenities or structure that we would normally have if we were just working. It's just too large. So to get a project of this size, we're almost having to set up a small city or even a pretty good sized cities, quite frankly. And that's what a lot of the structure of this is. So, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to hit that because you hit right on a point that very early on in this, I had asked some questions about, and I appreciate you making sure we say it publicly what that is.
Well, it's a project of this magnitude, its scope, its complexity. I can't point. I've been around for a long time, and I can't remember anything like this in our area. All right, I'm going to go back. I'm going to change up one thing. Chairman Moody's been sitting over there, so thoughtful, quietly determining what she's going to say. And so prior to us going and departing to break bread, she has some words of wisdom that she'd like to provide us. So Chairman Moody.
And thank you, Honorable Chairman, for duly noting the quietness and contemplation. But I do appreciate you all being here. And I've learned through the years, I took office here. I was sitting here by Tipton County in 2013. And I've learned from that time how important it is to know history. And so for this body, and then I do have a question, but the wastewater is coming through Tipton County into the Mississippi River. And I was blessed to have some locals who their families have lived on the Mississippi River for generations. They know that river like the back of their hand. And they called me and said, this cannot happen. The original location for the outflow was going to end up being in the shallowest part of that river. Half the year it's flooded. It was right at the mouth of the scenic Catchy River, which is a protected river. So when it's flooded, guess where that's going? And then the other half of the year, it would be exposed on sandbars. So we began the appeal. They picked me up, took me out in the side by side, and we rode all up and down. They showed me where the deepest part of the river was, which would be the ideal place. Even though it's treated water, it's still wastewater, and where that river could continue to do its job with it. And that's my interpretation, maybe not scientific. But so we began the appeal with TDEC to hear us out and reconsider where that outflow was going to go. And we were blessed with TDEC sending some folks out to come and let them take that tour and listen to our local folks. And so that outflow was changed to the deeper part. And so I'm grateful to TDEC for listening and sending their folks out. But again, I guess I'm telling that history of why it's so important that we listen to the locals that do know history and just so many things that they could add to the conversation. Because like Chairman Vaughn, I was concerned with that part and that broad authority. And since we already have that outflow coming, how would that change Tipton County and where that's going to? So I do want to share the history and learn more about that answer. And I think, boy, I had a question and I kept talking so long. But anyway, I do, again, just to hit the high note of how important the locals' input is. And since you're not TDEC, but I think I just thought of the question. It's my understanding, and again, not being a voting member of the Mega Site Authority Board, but they were gracious to always include me, and I tried to go. And Commissioner Rolfe, I would like to say thank you for the many times you came in person. I know how busy you are, so thank you for giving us that attention and all your work on this. It's very much appreciated. But my question is, it's my understanding that the wastewater treatment and all those plans for that were done assuming, how do I say it, that outflow it can handle whatever capacity of contaminants that may come, just looking futuristic. Am I correct?
Yes, ma'am. May I answer? Again, Bobby Rolfe, and thank you. And you are correct. Your community was enormously patient. And yes, sir, nobody bats 1,000%. Yes, ma'am. And we discovered that needed to be redesigned. And of course, we had already done a lot of work, and we redesigned it. And so the new outflow or outfall is at the core of engineers. You can imagine not only getting permits, but then to get their permission. And so we have corrected that and been very sensitive. And it was, I'm not going to say it was intentional. It made no sense to us as well that you would have an outfall there. The great news is this new discharge outfall is in a flow of the river. And I believe if it isn't 40 feet or 50 feet deep, even in a bad year, it's going to obviously be the right answer.
Right.
And so thank you for that and your patience and your kind comments. And I could just say again, ECD, it's been one of the great team sport efforts. So a lot of accolades go to the team that I get to work with. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. And my stomach tells me that we're nearing dinner time. But first, we're going to go back in session. We will coordinate with our esteemed panel of guests to make sure that at least some of their representation may be back for any follow-up questions. But we are going to find ourselves in recess until 2 p.m. this afternoon. Thank you.
Mention, is that Corps of Engineers? You don't know.
Leela Lambert, are we good? We good? I mean, I think,
You've done a phenomenal job.
I know that we're gonna have some flying in from different directions that we
Yeah.
can't talk about, but we'll deal with those.
So the biggest thing, when I was talking about the domain, I mean, look, there's still some pretty good stuff in the statutes that does a lot of protections in there. And that cross-reference, for the best that I can tell, takes care of most of that.
Well, yeah, but you talked about for audits and stuff like that?
No, for eminent domain.
Oh, yeah, I mean, well,
They can't do anything anybody
a
else
lot
can
of them
do.
are gonna